So Gama Sutra has put up a couple interesting articles. One is the 5 biggest surprises in video games of 2012. The other is the 5 biggest disappointments. I thought it'd be good to go through the list here.
Sure.
See what we think about them. Some interesting things on here. Surprises first. 5 biggest surprises in video games in 2012. Number 1, Double Fine starts the Kickstarter revolution.
That's true.
This was, there were lots of Kickstarter. We heard about Kickstarter a lot this year.
Yeah, and there were gaming Kickstarters before the Double Fine one, but the Double Fine one was the first one to be like millions of dollars past funding.
It was the first really high-profile one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think they made $3.3 million. And what is that game that we make? Do we even know what? Like,
yeah, it's an adventure game. They've released some screenshots at this point and some art, and it's a point-and-click adventure game. Classic type of stuff that Ron Gilbert and the people there would have done, back in the day. And then there's Ouya, which is the most funded video game thing on Kickstarter, I think. I'm supposed to be getting one of those in March.
Oh, you bought it. You funded it.
No, I'm kidding.
So you funded it?
Yeah, I did.
Nice.
I just wanted a doorstop. So I'm thinking
it was a weird year for Kickstarter stuff, right? Like, I mean, I feel like it started off and then it kind of peaked. It was this big arc. We heard about it like crazy. And then I feel like now we're hearing more of the bad stories.
Well, what are the bad stories?
I also feel like
there was one a few weeks ago. There was a Kickstarter project that was $28 short of being funded.
Oh, I didn't hear about that. That's terrible.
Which is pathetic.
No, but surely they can just I'll just throw it.
Right? If we were all sitting here, we're sitting here, and they're like, they're gonna burn down the rec center, but we pull in $6 each or whatever. Then the other one is there was another company that spent all of their Kickstarter money on just other garbage.
Oh, so everyone just lost their money.
Yeah, so they're all just there's a lawsuit now and everything. So
this reminds me.
You have a strong stance on Kickstarter.
So I was gonna say this reminds me of when we were sitting around when Double Fine's Kickstarter first came out. We do our morning meeting, and I'm like, this Kickstarter thing is dumb, and everyone's like, what? You were one of them. Altano was one of them. He's like, everyone called me crazy or whatever, and I'm like, this is what's going to happen with Kickstarter. It's going to be this really cool thing. Some games are going to come out. Eventually, games won't come out. Things won't get funded. People are going to abscond with the money, and there's nothing you can do about it. Sure. And lo and behold, we're hearing those kinds of stories on a regular basis.
I go into every Kickstarter knowing that it's a risk, potentially. But that being said, I've had positive experiences with Kickstarter. I've funded a couple bands' albums. I've funded a couple games. I have the playable alphas for some of the games that I've played and funded. So.
We funded a little podcast.
Yeah, I'm fairly confident that it'll.
But you can't just say this Kickstarter thing's going to be. That's like these people are going to be bad. Yes, most of them will, but there might be some good people.
No, I agree with you. I think that there's
bad eggs.
There's some indie games that are cool, and like the records that are being made, board games. There's a lot of tabletop RPGs that are being made, which is cool. But what really frustrates me, there's one thing that's being funded right now, or maybe it just ended with Sony's PlayStation Move. Sebastian Joust game or whatever.
Oh, Johann Sebastian.
Yeah,
Sebastian.
And I'm like, Sony keeps.
Sports friends.
What really annoys me is when big companies get in on this. Because it's like you're a big company, fund it yourself. Like, why is Sony writing PlayStation blog entries and tweeting about this game? If you believe in it that much, which you clearly don't, because you won't fund it yourself.
Yeah.
Then fund it yourself.
Yeah.
I just think that Kickstarter is is cool, but also pie in the sky in a way. Like, you need to have capitalists, you need to have money, and publishers have money.
Yeah, I think some people that I've talked to that have been part of Kickstarters definitely were doing it because they knew that doing a Kickstarter, if they could reach their goal, would show enough interest that the investors would come.
Yeah,
like they knew that they weren't going to be able to fund it with just the Kickstarter.
If you really want to paint a fair picture here, it's not the Kickstarters that have been successfully funded. If you Google, there's like a blog full of failed Kickstarters.
Oh, yeah,
you go look at those and be like, all right, I have some faith here, because it's not like every single one is like, we got this idea for this dumb game and we need $1 million. People are like, fuck off. And for the most part, people said fuck off to a lot of really
Last
bad
I checked, Peter Molyneux's Kickstarter still isn't funded.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, why is a guy like that, one of the most prolific game designers of all time, how does he even have the audacity, to go to people and be like, I need your money to make my game? It's like, dude, you're Peter Molyneux. I'm pretty sure you can go to a publisher and get that money.
Right.
I just think people, more, if that's what you like, more power to you.
Dude, it's not that black and white, though. That's like people go, you're IGN, don't you have billions of dollars? And we're like, no. Like, we had these posters up for 2 years. They're all crooked and shit. We got scuff marks. This table used to break all the time. I mean,
no one's ever swept the studio either. I don't think ever.
No, never once.
No.
Never once.
We've gotten through 1 of 10.
Yeah, I know. Okay. So number 2 most surprising thing of 2012: Steam's greenlight process opens the submission floodgates.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool, and we've seen some Steam greenlight games actually go up, although it's still not entirely open at this point. Like, it's not like the top like voted games definitely get greenlit. It's like they vote on them, and then the people at Valve will be like, add this one, and this one.
And so like Valve was like, we're getting too many game submissions. We
Yeah.
can't do this. It's taking up too much of our time, right?
Sure, and especially from a bunch of indie games, right, where it's like, is the game even done? Is it up to snuff? Is this something the community is even going to want?
What is the? Explain this to me, because I don't know anything about this.
It's just like a community voting process where, I could go up right now and be like, I've created this indie game. I would love it to be distributed on Steam. Here's a trailer or some screenshots. Vote for it. And so then people vote and they're like, I would love to see this on Steam. And eventually Valve, it might take notice and be like, all right, we're going to give this person a publishing deal on Steam.
And then they have to QA and still and stuff themselves.
Yeah,
it's not like a group thing where they play the game and find the problems.
No.
No, but it used to be if you had a game, you just went through Valve.
Yeah.
You submitted the game to Valve, basically.
Right.
Interesting.
And there
That's a
was
cool
no-
idea.
Yeah.
And so this allows them to see that there already is interest in a product and get it out on Steam.
Smart. They know how to make money over there.
They do.
Lots of it.
They
Good for them.
do.
They're really good at. Well, they make good games. Number 3, Zynga buys. The way they word it is Zynga fills its mobile hole for 180 million. They bought OMG Pop, the developer of Draw Something, for 180 million.
That was a mistake.
I know, right? Remember Draw Something? Everybody played that for like 5
week.
minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it was over. A lot of mobile games are like that. They're
Yeah.
like, oh my god, this is amazing.
Well, those guys left all the way to the bank.
Well, yeah. That's from the time they put it out to the time Zynga paid them $180 million was 6 weeks. It happened really, really fast.
I mean, I guess
Good for them.
unless
That's
if they
wild.
if they
a
can
good run.
strike if they can strike lightning or lightning can strike twice for them, like maybe that your investment will be worth it. But it certainly wasn't for Draw
well,
Something.
yeah. I mean, this has been a bad year for Zynga. It's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
over for Zynga at this
Yeah.
point, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I just think that we're seeing generally in this kind of game space, in the electronic space and stuff, just overvaluation of a lot of things. We were talking about that program Yammer.
Yeah.
Like that Microsoft bought for like $3 billion. It's like,
Whoa,
okay,
no,
like,
they.
or like whatever outrageous amount. Yeah, it was like an outrageous amount of money. It's like when Yahoo bought GeoCities for like $5 billion in 1999. It's like that's the sure sign that
Yeah, that was a geosity.
there's going to be a bubble burst.
now, number 4, Colin, is Sony buys cloud gaming platform Gaikai.
Yeah, that's a huge acquisition. Now, I don't think what people realized about this acquisition is Sony wouldn't make an investment like this if they weren't positive that it was going to, because it was like $300 and something million to buy Gaikai. So they have no money.
380 million.
Yeah, $380 million. So Gaikai is going to be integral in the new PlayStation. I think that's pretty obvious.
Maybe
four.
Yammer's going to be integral in the new
New Xbox.
the new Xbox.
Yammering.
Yammering
Far Cry
up.
4.
So I just think that the Gaikai acquisition was, consider this: Sony shut down 3 of its studios this year after never shutting down any studios from 1994 to now, except for one, Incognito. They shut down 3 this year because they're like hemorrhaging money, but they still spent almost $400 million on Gaikai. So
Yeah.
so they know what's going on, and I think that it's going to be that the new PlayStation has basically ubiquitous cloud use with games, and they probably just buy digital versions.
Well, they saved a lot of money by not advertising the Vita.
They save a lot of money by not advertising anything at all.
That's true.
Except for Call of Duty on Vita, and I don't know why anyone would want to buy that garbage.
There's some ads for PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale.
Yeah, that never show the game.
Yeah, that's what I don't
Yeah,
like.
that's rough. Now you think about it.
Oh, it's this guy
Yeah,
fighting this
fighting-
guy
You can't
fighting
even
this
figure out
burlap
what it
sack. It's like no one knows who these characters. I mean, I love those characters, but no one knows who the hell Nathan Drake is.
No.
Gotta love him.
Number 5, The Walking Dead redefines adventure games.
Ah, fantastic.
We got a great
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, although I don't know if I'd put that in my top 5 surprises. I feel like Telltale's
Really?
been bringing back adventure games for a while, and
Yeah, but none of them has been as big as Walking Dead, right?
I agree. But they've already proven that they can do episodic
Sure.
adventure games successfully.
Yeah, but consider that Back to the Future. Like Greg and I always
Yeah.
thought this. Like Back to the Future is not really very good, and Jurassic Park, by all accounts,
really not
is even
good.
worse.
Yeah.
So like, I think the big surprise is not that Telltale's going to do an adventure game. Is that
Oh, that
like
is-
when I turned this game on, I was
that's
kind of
true.
skeptical. I played them all one day. I waited till episode 5 came out, and then I played them all like the day before Thanksgiving, and I was absolutely blown away by The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
The game plays not great, but well. There's a few like hiccups where like it becomes very gamey and you can't really play it.
Sure.
But the story's riveting. The characters are riveting. It's just very
Acting's
emotional.
great. And like a year ago, Anthony, like, would you have believed that we'd be talking about, Telltale's episodic
No.
series as,
No.
Game of the Year potential?
That there would be a whole like spectacle on TV for the VGAs
Yeah,
and
exactly.
everything. That those guys would be on the red carpet and stuff
I would
like
say that I would, but most people wouldn't because I love adventure games. But I wouldn't think they could have made an adventure game that would have appealed to so many people.
Yeah.
So I guess that is right.
And I think it transcends the license. It's not just like, oh, that popular TV show everyone likes is a cool, fun adventure game. No, like that, the game is better than the show. Like the game is really good, and there's a lot of people who've never played a game like that before.
Yeah.
Or even, in the last, like me, I haven't played an adventure game in years, and I sat down and I loved The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And that's a huge success right there, and that's a small team of people
Anybody hasn't
going up
played it,
against, Call of Duty and Borderlands and Halo and stuff like that.
They should know the game is not based off the show. Based off the comic, same continuity as the comic, not the same continuity as the show.
But I think Altano hit on something really interesting, which is that it feels and looks a lot like the show. I mean, obviously not the same fidelity. But what's cool is like when I watch the show and they're like in an abandoned building or whatever, and I'm like, look in that cabinet, look in that cabinet, and they just kind of ignored it. But in this game, like you can go through the minutia and search the empty drawers and do. I don't know. There was just something special about that game where I was like, I really just like doing all the little things, taking my time and.
What I appreciated about that game, and it's something I was thinking about today because Wind Waker turned 10 years old today.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, that game still looks beautiful. And
Yeah.
like The Walking Dead, I think, is still going to look pretty great in a few years just because they picked this art style and they kind of stuck with it, And I don't know if Call of Duty is going to look that great in a few years. Borderlands might, but I mean, just The Walking Dead is being like, here's...
So you like
Isn't it
cell
weird, like
shading?
it ages better than like Twilight Princess.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Right? Like,
absolutely.
oh,
No question.
We're all the Wind Waker haters now. Remember all the Wind Waker haters back in 2003? Oh, they were so wrong then. And they're so wrong now.
They're begging for an HD remake now. That's what they're doing.
I'll say something potentially controversial. Wind Waker, the last great Zelda game.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, I could give you that.
Agreed.
All right, those are the biggest surprises Gama Sutra picked. Here are the 5 biggest disappointments of 2012.
Here we go.
Number 1, Star Wars: The Old Republic.
I mean, it was a good game. It was a very good game. It was an excellent game, even I think. But I mean, I guess it was a disappointment for EA.
Yeah, what happened with that game though?
Subscription-based MMOs are dead, man. Unless you're Blizzard, and
So
even Blizzard,
they spent a long time developing it. Like they started developing it.
that was the other thing.
By
right?
the time it was released, the model has changed.
When I went and saw that game for the very first time at the announcement, I think I was still like an intern. I had just gotten started like 5 years ago. And the fact that it just came out like this much farther along, like the game came out and it was already behind. That was the biggest problem with it, right? Was that it, it's like when EA released Origin or when this came out, you cannot release and be like, all right, we're out and we're going to catch up to our competitors. No, you have to release on par with your competitors to compete and then get ahead of them. Like they were like trying to play catch up for months. They weren't even as good as like a World of Warcraft, which had been out for years when they launched. And it was just obvious that like, it has the Star Wars license. It's a really cool game. But like people do not want to pay $15 a month. The value proposition for MMOs has changed.
Well, I remember when I was talking to people like you, especially you burned through a lot of the story in that game.
Yeah, I bet.
And people were just like, we want more. And it's like, you got 150 hours of like original new Star Wars story and like, we want more. It's like, well, like if you look at like The Walking Dead, like we had Dave Fennoy here at IGN, and he was talking about how he had like the script had 12,000 lines in it. And it's just like, that's just a small team of people working on a game that was 5 hours long. I can't imagine what it took to make a game like Star Wars: The Old Republic, when they're trying to satiate all these Star Wars fans at the same time.
Gotta have a lot of Twi'leks in there.
Yeah.
It was a long time in development. It might be the most expensive game ever made.
Possibly,
I feel like all the time that was
Quite
put
possibly,
into it.
yeah.
And the release timing of it was weird, right? It was like right before Christmas.
Yeah, right
was.
before Christmas. I remember that.
Yeah.
What was the? Do we know how much it cost to make and how much money they made?
I think it cost something like $350 million to make.
Yeah, but like, they sold X amount of copies. It's a $50 game, $60
Yeah, it
game?
was $50.
You have to buy it
for
and
that.
then subscribe to it.
Yeah, that was the original model. At this point, it's free to play.
Yeah.
But
right.
like
So-
I don't think numbers have jumped up drastically, have they?
No, not that they not
that
enough
they've
that
announced.
they've been like, oh,
yeah.
we're back.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
I'd say it's in trouble. I'd say any MMO at this point is in a bad way.
Yeah.
Unless you're World of Warcraft.
What about Guild Wars 2?
Guild Wars is okay. Yeah, they're probably doing okay. I was about to say.
Number 2 disappointment, PlayStation Vita.
Yeah, disappointment for Sony, maybe, not a disappointment
the
for me.
console's bad, but like
No,
It's a great piece of hardware.
It
Great
really
piece of
is.
hardware.
It really
I
love
will say
Vita.
that the amount of games on there that I've wanted to play have been a little lacking. Like, and maybe it's Sony's messaging or whatnot, but it doesn't feel like there's anything coming out. Even though I know there are things that come out, It doesn't feel like here's your first year of your new console. There should be a crap ton of stuff coming.
No, I agree.
And a crap ton of stuff on the horizon. And I feel like I'm like waiting. Still.
There's nothing. Yeah. Nothing there. There's no announced Final Fantasy game coming to Vita.
Final Fantasy X was announced 2 years ago, but we have never seen it. So.
10 for Vita?
Yeah,
so
like
was
10
BioShock,
HD.
and we know
I mean, they remember at TGS 2 years ago, they were like, Final Fantasy X HD is coming to PS3 and Vita, and then later they admitted that like they never even started working on it.
Yeah.
So like, I think what people have to understand with the Vita, Greg and I talk about this a lot because this is what all we talk about is PlayStation because we have nothing better to do, is I think that there's a few interesting things about the Vita. Part of why I think the Vita is failing is because I think the handheld market generally is over. I think Nintendo probably has it. I think even if Nintendo released a handheld in 5 years, I think it would struggle. Being a PlayStation fan, and we've all had PlayStation consoles or whatever, means different things than being a Nintendo fan, where it's like you have kind of this association with Mario and Zelda and all these things. Like a lot of the association we have with PlayStation are things that are older, and PS3 was kind of a rough start, had a rough start or whatever, so which I think tarnished the PlayStation name quite a bit. But I think Sony's not concerned about Vita because I still believe that Vita has some sort of functionality with their new console. And I think that the reason that they're not necessarily, it won't connect, I mean, it's not powerful enough to do what the PS4 does, but maybe some sort of remote play capability, some sort of second screen or whatever, where they kind of realize, like, we can get the Vita out now, let's see how it does, and we won't really worry about it because we're going to push it again when we announce this new console, and maybe they're even going to come together. I mean, Greg and I think about all these we talk about all these kinds of crazy ideas. The other thing is that the Vita looks totally devoid of titles next year, and other than Tearaway and Killzone and Soul Sacrifice, I mean, you'd be really hard pressed to think of one game that comes out next year. So it's certainly in trouble.
Yeah. So Gamasutra actually has a really good line here. Call of Duty Black Ops 2 Declassified came out recently. It was pretty bad, right?
Yeah, it's really bad.
Their line is, with Call of Duty all but assuredly a failure, the Vita's outlook for 2013 is extremely muted. What Western publisher will touch a system that Call of Duty can't save? It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's good. I mean,
really good.
Yeah.
The problem would go. I mean, the problem with Call of Duty goes so much deeper because we don't really know the story, right, behind like what happened with Call of Duty. We know it was announced before Vita came out at E3 2 years ago, but we also know that the developer that made it made a bad shooter in Resistance Burning Skies, and then in 6 to 8 months made another shooter that's just as bad as Resistance Burning Skies. Like, what do you expect? Like,
we don't know the story, but it's an age-old tale, right? Like, small group of people gets a licensed property that they have to shit out within 2 or 3 months, and result is terrible. Welcome to the video game industry. It's every movie-based title, TV-based title, everything ever made that's had like, this is all we got, and this is the amount of time we have to make it. It's crap. No one makes a game of that magnitude in 2 or 3 months or 6 months or something like that.
No, and what's really sad, and what the saddest part I think is that if they put the amount of time into it and just said, let's just delay it a year. Let's just delay it a year. And get someone, get one of their internal studios to work on it, Raven or someone like that, or Neversoft. Get one of these guys to work on the game, give it the proper love, and then that could sell Vitas and Call of Duties on Vita for years to come. But now that you put your foot out with this game, people are like, well, forget that. It's the same thing with
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the best Call of Duty game ever made couldn't save the Vita or the 3DS, because I don't think that's the type of experience people want on handhelds anymore. It's like when people pull out their phones and they play a game real quick. People like you and me are different, right? Like, I'll sit down and play a full-fledged Resident Evil game on a 3DS or a Vita or a PSP and really enjoy it and be like, this is console quality being on my couch. But I think most people just want that on their televisions, and when they're on the go, they want something quick.
I mean, that hits on a perfect note, which is perhaps the Vita is just too little too late.
Yeah.
And it certainly was in development for a long time. So.
Yeah.
Maybe just too late, because I don't think it's too little. Because like we were saying, it's a great piece of
It is the handheld I always wanted.
Yeah.
It really is.
It is like so, I mean, I say it, people get mad at me, and I don't mean it as really a slight to the 3DS, because the 3DS is a fine piece of hardware with fine games, whatever, and I own one, but it makes the 3DS look so bad. Like, when you just put the games on next to each other, you look at their functionality next to each other, but what really matters are the games, and 3DS has the games that people want.
It's true. All right, disappointment number 3, E3. Their argument just being that it's sort of loud, tacky, and increasingly irrelevant, especially compared to shows that are thriving like PAX. That just gets bigger and bigger every year, and there's a really positive vibe around PAX.
Yeah, I mean, to me, when we go to E3 now, it's like when people are like, well, at least you get to go to the press conference. I'm like, I don't. I watch them in a room on, like, at this point, you don't need to go to E3 to see the best parts, because the best parts of the press conferences, like, you can stream those. They're all streams.
So you don't have to read a live blog anymore like we did in the 2000 or 2001 or whatever. I think that E3 has always been loud and tacky.
True.
But maybe increasingly irrelevant. Sure, but I don't know that last year's E3 was weird. For instance, we saw a game that was clearly next gen. in Watch Dogs that like they can't say is next gen because the consoles aren't announced yet. So everyone's in this weird hibernation period where they're like, we want to show you things, but we really kind of can't. We're gonna show you the same thing with Phantom Pain. We saw VGAs. Like that's clearly, you know, like even though it says PS3 and Xbox on the website, like that looks like a pretty game. Like maybe that's running on next gen hardware. They just can't put their cards on the table yet. And I actually have some faith in E3, you know, in E3 this year. They kind of go in cycles. If you've been to enough of them, we all have. Some are really great, some are really bad, some are in the middle, and I think that we're going to get a pretty good one this year.
If we don't get next gen stuff at this year's, people will call it the worst E3 of all time.
Oh yeah, but there'll be next.
The expectations for this E3 and the last E3 and everyone before it are insurmountably through the roof, more than they ever should be. I think that is kind of curbing that before you go into any of these things. But I also think, like you say, PAX gets bigger and bigger. It is, but I have a feeling that like that show will once again bubble up to E3 size and then become irrelevant as well, because I think that the future is not publishers playing by those rules. It's them setting up their own events. It's them having their own streams, their own sites. Like, you know, Valve doesn't show up, Rockstar doesn't show up. There are companies that Nintendo barely shows up. You know, there are companies that just play by their own rules these days, and they can just say one day, hey, we're going to put out a trailer for our game. We don't care about E3. And I think that's the future, is all these kind of like micro events and smaller things. And having everyone under one roof and some big bloated expensive thing is not the answer.
It used to be the big deal because it was the one time a year you'd have journalists from all over the world in one spot. But nowadays that's not necessarily needed, and you're right. Why sacrifice your game's FaceTime with a bunch of other big profile games when you could do something on your own?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and everyone was still right about
I also think about, I mean, you know, it was only a couple years ago that the three of us went, you know, to Gamescom. And you know, it could be argued that Gamescom is becoming much more important. And
Gamescom is like 5 times as big as E3.
And it's a consumer show, so people kind of look at it as like, well, it's not really, you know, it's not, you know, it's open to the public. But you know, we were there. Gamescom's a big deal, and I think, you know, as Europe's not a burgeoning market, it is a huge market for video games, and I think that if anything, Gamescom, you know, trounces E3 in the next couple of years in terms of studios showing things off there and stuff. Certainly, PlayStation's much more important in Europe, for instance, than North America.
Yeah, for sure. Disappointment number 4: Steam Greenlight.
They put it as one of their surprises and disappointments.
Well, surprise isn't necessarily like a positive. Their comment being that it turns, you know, getting games onto Steam into a popularity contest, and what's popular isn't necessarily great.
That's true, but the alternative is that maybe none of these games would ever end up, or a much smaller grouping of them would ever end up on Steam because Valve wouldn't give them the time of day or something. That being said, there are still other distribution services. Like, I think Steam Greenlight is great because it gives people a chance to vote on these games and hear about games they like. For instance, there are people that have their pulse on indie games, right? They read specific forums and that sort of thing. But for other people, the only way they're going to hear about these games is through Greenlight. You know, and it's a chance for products to have a great trailer that can sell them and reach an audience they wouldn't otherwise do. And if you're really not happy with it, and you think that it's a bad thing for indie games, there are other ones, like Desura is like the best indie games distribution service. So there are other options out there. Steam is not the only option.
Yeah, I think it's a benefit to have discovery tools like that. Like if I reach into my phone and I open up the App Store and I'm just like, oh, here's what they've deemed are the best or the most popular, whatever they're spotlighting. It's the only way I'm going to see that stuff, right? I'm not going to go digging through thousands of indie games and shitty little apps to find, you know, some little thing that.
Why shouldn't it be a popularity contest?
Of course, everything is. We could go on IGN right now. We could pick a game that no one knows about. We could write about it every day for the next 6 months, and that game would sell 100,000 times more than it ever would before that, even if it was shit.
The power of Altano.
The final disappointment is something close to your heart, Colin. It's Mega Man's 25th birthday, and nobody came.
Yep.
Capcom is like, it's been the 25th anniversary of Mega Man all year long, and Capcom hasn't done hardly anything.
New Mega Man game coming out for free.
Yeah, so in December, at the twilight of the year, they finally say, oh yes, we have a fan-made game coming out.
This is like the drunken stepdad coming home the day after Christmas. He's like, I got you some shit.
From the airport.
Yeah, from the airport.
Shop.
It's one of those fucking globes. With the
it's embarrassing.
How many companies have beloved game franchises that date back to the NES?
Right?
That's pretty rare.
Yeah, I mean, you got a company like Sony, right? Like, and they put together PlayStation All Stars. Like, don't you care about these characters?
These characters are like 10 years old.
Not
like,
really.
Okay.
Capcom's sitting there with Mega Man. It's like one of the most iconic video game characters of all time. They're like, gives a shit.
Yeah, they don't understand what they have with Mega Man. I think that's pretty clear. I mean, I still think that when Inafune left, I don't think it was clearly on good terms. I think that they frankly canceled Legends 3 and Universe to spite him. And I think that, and despite that team, And I think that like they don't know what to do with it now. You know, like Universe was almost done. Clements played it. You know, Legends 3 was like they released a playable demo of Legends 3, and people were gonna like have this. They were gonna do this really cool thing where you kind of give input, and they keep releasing it, and they. And like the game was.
We were this fucking close to living in a world where we got a brand new NES Mega Man game every year. They did 9, they did 10, and then why didn't just do 11? Make him fight Couchman, give him a dog that turns into a bicycle, and then 7 more of those, and yes, every year. Here's my money.
Oh my god, I would kill for that.
Every year.
I mean, the thing about Mega Man 9 and 10 that frustrate me is that they admitted that those games were profitable, so there's no reason for them to not.
Of course they were profitable. They were NES games in 2011.
Well, I mean, to be fair, like to retroactively teach people how to use those tools, and I'm sure it was like much more complicated than people give them credit for. Plus, like,
not as complicated as to make a single level in the Lost Planet 4.
Of course not. Of course not. But yeah, I mean, this is. I mean, you know, you guys kind of alluded to it, and it's funny. You know, they have this PC game that's a fan-made game.
Yeah.
That's been floating around for a while, and then sometime in November, someone's like, you know, guys, like Mega Man came out in Japan like December 17th, and we don't have any games for Mega Man's 25th anniversary. And they're like, oh, contact this guy on this.
Let's go on DeviantArt, see if someone drew something for us.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm gonna review that game next week. The game looks fun. It looks like Mega Man.
Yes,
it looks like a very sterile Mega Man game, like the original Mega Man.
You know why it looks great? Because Mega Man fans love Mega Man.
Yeah, especially 8-bit.
So give us something.
But yeah, they screwed the pooch with Mega Man. And while they said that they're gonna have more announcements and do all these things, whatever, like I want to see the proof. We need X9, we need Mega Man 11. I don't know why you canceled Legends 3, and I keep talking about it, and some people think I'm crazy. Reboot Mega Man.
That's it. This would have been the perfect time to reboot it, right?
Call it Mega Man. I talked about it on Podcast Beyond this week. Call it Mega Man. Have it be like an open world game, and where
you have to kill the 9 bosses. You gain their powers. Like it writes itself.
Yes,
like,
it's so easy.
I envisioned it like Zelda.
They had Splash Woman in the last one.
Yeah,
Splash Woman.
Yeah, Splash Woman was also. And
They're just straight. They can do anything they want.
Sheep Man. But I envision it like to play like Zelda. I said remake the original Mega Man. You know, 2 scientists work on these robots. One scientist turns and tries to turn them all. One resists. So you play as that robot. There are like 6 dungeons or whatever that you have to find around this world. You go and fight them in any order you want. You get their powers. It's like really dark, really gritty, like really apocalyptic.
And you're sitting there at the end. You go, oh man, we need a last level. What do we do? Make him fight them all over again.
Are we saying like Super Serious Mega Man?
Yeah.
Where it shows him like ripping the arm off of the guy he defeats
Yeah,
and
that'd
being
be
like
badass.
and reattaching it, and it's like violent.
I'd rather see them try to do something than they would try to ignore the fact that they have Mega Man and that Inafune grew tired of their bullshit, frankly.
Yeah.
And that's why. Like, Mega Man fans are very clear, they're very passionate. You release Mega Man 9, everyone's like, oh, they'll buy that, they just want it, and no one will buy it again. Mega Man 10 came out, sold just as well, you know?
Yeah.
It's the same thing we talked about with old school Castlevania, like, what are you doing, Konami?
To be fair, I think Nintendo just passed the 25th anniversary of Zelda and Metroid, and those were great celebrations. Remember those? Nope.
Yeah.
I don't think they have any. I don't think they know what to do with Mega Man. I think that they're like, we don't know. We don't know what to do.
Should probably hire you. Mega Man. You have good ideas.
Yeah, there's your. You know what, Capcom? Take that idea. Reboot Mega Man on the Mega Man 1 story in an open world, dungeon crawling kind of game like Zelda. There you go. Millions of copies sold. You're welcome, Kyle Moriarty.
I would play the hell out of that game.
Me too.
Those were interesting. They were thought-provoking lists. I like those.
Yeah, it was good.
Some good discussion. That completes our final game sweep of the year. Wow. Yeah, that wraps us up. We're going to take a break over the holidays. We'll return in a few weeks. But I hope everybody has a very happy, very safe holidays. This is IGN Game Scoop, and we're out.